Have you ever felt like your mind is a shattered mirror? Each fragment reflecting a different worry, a different notification, a different task, 100 browser tabs open in your soul. I lived there for years, a ghost drifting in the current of my own life, pulled in every direction, truly present in none. I searched for the secret to focus, for that one technique that would finally piece me back together. I read about discipline, about willpower, about fighting distraction, but the fight only left me more exhausted. What if the map to finding your focus isn't a straight line, but a circle? What if the path back to yourself wasn't about climbing a mountain of effort, but about learning a gentle, repeating pattern? This is the story of how I stopped fighting my mind and started drawing a map for it instead. A map that looked less like a battle plan and more like an ancient sacred flower. This is the story of the Mandala of Attention. The first time I saw it, it wasn't in a monastery or a sacred text. It was in a dusty corner of a secondhand bookstore, an illustration in a book about ancient symbols. A mandala, a perfect, intricate circle radiating from a single, calm center. I was captivated, not just by its beauty, but by a feeling I couldn't name, a sense of order. In the chaotic library of my own mind, this single image felt like a quiet, organizing principle. I took the book home, and on a blank piece of paper, I tried to draw one. My hand shook, my lines were wobbly, and within moments, my mind was gone, thinking about dinner, an email I forgot to send, a conversation I regretted. I felt that familiar wave of frustration, that tightening in the chest, that silent storm that says, "You're failing again." It's that moment when your mind starts shouting over itself. A dozen voices reminding you of everything unfinished, everything imperfect. It feels like drowning in noise, even in total silence. See, a voice whispered inside me, "You can't even do this. You can't even focus for 30 seconds. And in that moment, I believed it. I believed something was wrong with me, that maybe other people were simply built differently, stronger, calmer, more disciplined. Have you ever felt that way too? Like your mind just refuses to stay still, no matter how much you want it to? If you have, you're not alone. Feel free to share it in the comments below, because sometimes naming the storm is the first step toward calming it. I almost gave up. I saw the center of the mandala as the goal, the place of perfect, unbroken concentration. Every time my mind wandered, I felt like I had fallen off the path, a failure. The drawing became a testament to my own inadequacy, each stray thought, a smudge on the pristine ideal. But then, looking at the half-finished, messy circle on the page, something shifted. I looked back at the book, at the complex patterns. They weren't just a center. They were layers, rings upon rings, expanding outward, and then, invariably, leading the eye back to the middle. It wasn't just a destination. It was a journey that included the outer edges, a journey that was designed for return. That was the revelation. The mandala wasn't a photograph of a focused mind. It was a map for a wandering one. The center was my intention, the breath, the task, the moment. The intricate patterns and outer rings weren't a mistake. They were the designated lands of distraction. They were the places the mind was expected to go. The lines leading back to the center weren't a sign of failure. They were the very path of the practice itself. The goal wasn't to stay in the center. The goal was to notice when I had wandered and to gently, kindly follow a line back home. My wandering mind wasn't the enemy of the practice. It was the entire point of it. The act of returning, over and over, was the training. It was a compass for mental focus, where every direction, even lost, eventually pointed back to here. This isn't just poetry, it's neurology. Our brains have what scientists call the default mode network, or DMN. It's the brain's idle state, the network that lights up when we're not focused on a task. It's responsible for daydreaming, for thinking about the future, rehashing the past. It's the part of us that wanders. For years, I saw this as a flaw, but it's not. It's the source of our creativity, our ability to plan, our sense of self. The problem isn't that it exists. It's that we live there unconsciously all the time. When we practice with the mandala, each time we notice we've drifted and guide our attention back to the center, we're strengthening a different network, the task-positive network. We're exercising the muscle of executive attention. The mandala became my personal trainer for this muscle. It taught me that the return is more important than the staying. It transformed the harsh judge in my head into a gentle guide. Tracing its lines, I learned to say, there you are, mind. Off in the future again. That's fine. Let's just follow this curve back to the center. It was an act of profound self-compassion, repeated 100 times in a single session. The mandala wasn't a prison for my attention. It was a playground with a clear and loving call to come back home when the bell rings. And in that, it remapped not just my focus, but my relationship with my own mind. Because maybe the path to peace was never about silencing the noise. Maybe it's about listening with tenderness, learning the rhythm of return, the beautiful looping dance of coming back to the quiet. For the longest time, the idea of flow felt like a myth reserved for gods and geniuses. I'd read the books, heard the stories, the jazz musician lost in a solo, the surgeon performing a flawless operation, the writer for whom words pour out like water. It was a state of peak performance, of effortless excellence. And I, struggling to even focus on a single email, felt completely shut out from that world. I tried to find it. I'd set up elaborate projects, clean my schedule, try to force a flow state, like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. But the more I chased it, the more it slipped through my fingers. Every attempt left me more tense, more self-aware, more frustrated. It's that familiar kind of frustration, isn't it? When you try so hard to feel calm, that the trying itself becomes exhausting. When your mind whispers, why can't you just be in the moment? Why can't you focus like everyone else? It's that quiet battle we fight alone, between who we are right now and who we think we should be. Have you ever felt that too? That ache of effort, when all you wanted was peace. If so, you're not alone. Maybe we've all been standing in the same storm. The breakthrough came, as they often do, when I wasn't looking for it. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon. I was feeling listless, uninspired, and on a whim, I pulled out a cheap set of watercolors I bought years ago. I wasn't trying to create a masterpiece. I wasn't trying to achieve anything. I just put a wet brush to paper and watched the color bleed. Blue into green, green into yellow. I wasn't thinking. I was just doing. I followed the water's edge, watched the pigments bloom, felt the rough texture of the paper under my hand, the soft drag of the bristles. And then, I blinked. I looked up. The light outside had changed. The afternoon had softened into evening. Hours had passed. I hadn't solved world hunger. I hadn't written a symphony. I had just made a few colorful blobs on a piece of paper. But for the first time, I felt it. The absence of effort, the quiet in the noise, the dissolution of the nagging voice. The world had shrunk to the tip of my brush. That was the moment I could finally define flow for myself. Not in the grand language of peak performance, but in two simple words: ease and motion. It wasn't about being a genius. It was about the disappearing act of the self. It's that moment when the doer merges with the doing. The chase was the problem. The expectation was the barrier. Flow, I realized, wasn't a state to be achieved, but a state to be allowed. It arises not from force, but from a delicate balance of conditions. And I began to see that these conditions didn't require a grand piano or a blank canvas. They were hidden in plain sight, in the fabric of my everyday life. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who first coined the term, identified the key ingredients for flow. It requires a clear goal, immediate feedback, and a perfect match between the level of challenge and your level of skill. Too hard, and you get anxiety. Too easy, and you get boredom. But right in that sweet spot, that's where flow lives. And I started to see this everywhere. Washing a dish. The goal is clear, get it clean. The feedback is immediate. It's either soapy or it's not. The challenge matches the skill perfectly. When I stopped thinking about the mountain of dishes and just focused on the one in my hands, the warmth of the water, the scrape of the sponge, I could find a microdose of flow. Chopping vegetables for a salad, folding laundry, walking down the street with the simple goal of the next footstep. Flow wasn't a mystical state I had to earn. It was my natural inheritance, waiting for me in the simplest of tasks, if only I could bring my full attention to them. It was the reward for the training the mandala had given me. The mandala taught me how to bring my attention back to the center. Flow was the experience of what it felt like to be at the center, even just for a moment. You don't have to climb a mountain to touch the sky. Sometimes you just have to notice the feeling of water on your hands. But what happens when the world is too loud? When even the simplest task feels overwhelming? What do you hold on to then? I used to think meditation was about emptying the mind. I'd sit on a cushion, close my eyes, and declare war on my own thoughts. Every time a thought appeared, I tried to wrestle it to the ground, to force it out. My meditation sessions were battlegrounds, and I always lost. I'd end up more agitated, more frustrated, more convinced that I was fundamentally broken. I can't meditate, I told myself. My mind is just too busy. The silence I was chasing felt like a distant, mocking shore I could never reach. The effort was immense, and the reward was nothing, just a deeper sense of failure. The shift happened when I gave up on the idea of an empty mind and instead looked for a full hand. One day on a walk, I picked up a small, smooth stone from a riverbed. It was gray and unremarkable, but it fit perfectly in my palm. Its weight was real, its coolness a fact. Later that day, when I tried to meditate, instead of fighting my thoughts, I just held the stone. And every time my mind spiraled into a worry or a memory, which it did a dozen times a minute, I didn't fight it. I just gently squeezed the stone. I returned my attention to its solid, cool reality. The weight of my hand, the smooth surface under my thumb. It wasn't about emptying my mind. It was about giving it one simple, tangible thing to come home to. That stone became my first soft anchor. I'll never forget one particular morning. The world felt like it was screaming. My alarm had failed. Emails were flooding in with urgent demands. The noise of traffic outside was relentless. I felt that familiar panic rising in my chest, a feeling of being pulled apart. My instinct was to jump into the chaos, to start reacting, to run faster. But instead, I sat down for just 2 minutes. I closed my eyes, and in my mind, I pictured that stone. I felt its imagined weight, its imagined coolness. The chaos didn't stop. The emails didn't disappear. The noise didn't cease. But by focusing on that one simple, unchanging sensation, I found a tiny quiet island in the middle of the hurricane. It was like holding a single, steady thread in a tangled storm. It didn't make the storm go away, but it gave me a place to hold on. It proved to me that my inner peace didn't depend on my outer circumstances. That's what an anchor truly is in meditation. It's not about controlling the waves of thought. It's about giving the mind something steady to rest upon. An anchor is simply a point of focus, a home base for awareness, a gentle reminder that even when the tide pulls you out, you can always return. And these anchors come in many forms. In mindfulness, I've come to rely on 5 gentle gateways, 5 ways of returning home to the present moment. The first soft anchor is the breath, that quiet rise and fall of your chest, the rhythm that's been with you since the moment you were born. The second anchor is the body, the simple weight of your hands resting where they are, the grounding contact of your feet against the floor. The body never lies. It always tells you where here is. The third is sound, the hum of a refrigerator, a bird singing outside, the soft tone of your own voice. Each sound is like a wave, arising, fading, returning to silence. The fourth soft anchor is sight, the way light dances across a wall, how shadows shift and colors breathe. Even when your eyes are closed, you can sense the play of light behind the lids, a quiet reminder of life still moving around you. And the fifth is touch, the fabric brushing against your skin, the cool air passing over your face, the warmth of your palms resting together. Each of these is a doorway back into now, a gentle invitation to return to what has always been here. The breath reminds us we are alive. The body reminds us we are here. Sound teaches us to listen. Sight awakens our wonder. Touch reconnects us to the world we so easily forget. The anchor isn't magic. It's a neurological bridge between chaos and calm. When we're stressed, the amygdala, our brain's alarm, fires without pause. But when we shift our attention to a steady, neutral sensation, a breath, a sound, a stone, the prefrontal cortex activates. That's the part of the brain that whispers, "It's okay. You're safe now." Each time you return to the anchor, you're teaching your nervous system a new story about safety. You're showing your mind that stillness isn't something to fear. It's something to trust. Building that trust is the essence of meditation. It's knowing with quiet certainty that no matter how wild the storm becomes, you always have a place to return. But remember, a tool is only useful if you remember to use it. An anchor doesn't calm the sea. It simply keeps you from drifting too far. So, how do we build the habit of remembering? I used to believe that focus was a matter of heroic willpower. I thought I just needed to be more disciplined, to try harder. I'd wake up with grand intentions. Today, I will not get distracted. Today, I will be a laser beam of productivity. And for an hour, maybe two, it worked. But willpower is a finite resource. It's like a muscle that gets tired. By 3 p.m., my focus was in tatters. I find myself scrolling aimlessly, watching my energy drain away, blaming myself for my lack of grit. I was trying to lift 100 pounds without ever having trained. I was treating attention as a choice, when in reality, it's a skill. And skills aren't born from single, heroic efforts. They're built slowly through consistent small habits. My training didn't start in the gym. It started with a glass of water. It was an idea I stumbled upon, almost by accident. The habit was simple. The very first sip of water I take each morning, I would pay complete attention to it. That's it. Not the whole glass. Just the first sip. So, the next morning, I picked up the glass. I felt its coolness in my hand. I watched the light refract through it. I brought it to my lips, and for 1 second, I simply noticed. I felt the water pass my lips, the coolness on my tongue, the subtle texture as it slid down my throat. It was a 2-second meditation, so small, so light, that the resistance in my mind had nowhere to hide. I couldn't say I didn't have time for it. It was a tiny, weightless repetition. From there, I added another. I called it the pause before the portal. Our phones are portals, gateways to infinite information and infinite distraction. My old habit was to grab it instantly, to dive in, swept away by the digital current. The new habit was to introduce a breath, just one. Before my thumb unlocked the screen, I took one conscious inhale and one slow exhale. In that tiny pause, a space opened, a space for choice. And in that space, I'd ask myself, why am I opening this? What am I looking for? Sometimes the honest answer was to escape, and that was okay. But other times, the pause reminded me of my real intention. That single breath turned distraction into awareness. I was no longer a victim of the algorithm. I was an agent, making a choice. These micro habits became my daily push-ups for the attention muscle. And here's the truth. Focus isn't something mystical. It's neurological. Science tells us that our mind works through 4 kinds of attention. The first is sustained attention, the quiet endurance that lets you stay with one task for more than a fleeting moment, like reading a single page or listening deeply to a friend's story without reaching for your phone. The second is selective attention. It's the art of filtering the noise to focus on what truly matters, like hearing your name in a crowded room and instantly tuning in. Then comes alternating attention, our ability to move gracefully between tasks, like cooking dinner while holding a conversation on the phone, a gentle switching that the brain can manage when done with awareness. And finally, there's divided attention, the one we all think we're good at, but that silently drains us. It's what happens when we try to do everything at once. Scrolling while listening, typing while thinking, living half here and half somewhere else. And yet, most of us spend our lives trapped in that last one, constantly switching, constantly scattering. Our attention span has grown short, not because we're lazy, but because our environment is perfectly designed to fragment it. Every notification, every scroll, every flashing screen is an invisible tug on the fabric of our focus. Every app, every notification, every ding and scroll is crafted to hijack the brain's reward system. Each time we check something new, we get a tiny hit of dopamine. It feels good for a moment, but it trains the mind to crave novelty instead of depth. So the problem isn't that our attention is broken. It's that it's overstimulated. We're not losing focus. We're being pulled apart by 1,000 invisible strings. That's why starting small matters so much. Each mindful sip, each intentional breath is a thread we reclaim, a thread we weave back into ourselves. This approach is grounded in the science of habit formation. As authors like James Clear explain, habits form through a cue, routine, and reward loop. For my water habit, the cue was thirst. The routine was mindful sipping. The reward, a tiny burst of presence. For my phone habit, the cue was reaching for screen. The routine was the pause. The reward, a feeling of calm control. I wasn't fighting my brain's programming. I was rewriting it, installing new, kinder software, one small repetition at a time. Over weeks and months, these tiny habits compounded. My ability to focus grew, not because I was trying harder, but because the muscle had been trained, sip by sip, breath by breath. You don't need an hour of meditation to change your life. You just need to truly taste your morning coffee. But how do you make sure you don't forget? How do you keep the practice alive, week after week, when life gets loud again? You can have the best map in the world, but it's useless if you forget to look at it. After the initial excitement of these discoveries, the mandala, the flow states, the soft anchors, I found that the gravitational pull of old habits was immense. A busy week would hit, and I'd forget to pause. Stress would mount, and I'd forget my anchor. Suddenly, I was back at square one, feeling like a ghost in my own life, wondering where the clarity had gone. I had the tools, but I was leaving them in the toolbox. The problem wasn't the tools. It was the lack of a system for remembering, for checking in, realigning, and gently coming back. So I created a ritual. It wasn't complicated or time-consuming. Just one appointment, every Sunday evening, an appointment with myself. I would light a candle, make a cup of tea, and open a blank page in my journal. The flickering flame was a signal to my nervous system. This is sacred time. This is a moment for quiet. And on that blank page, I would write a single question. Where did my attention live this week? Now, you might wonder, what does a weekly check-in really mean? It's not a productivity hack. It's not about listing achievements or failures. A weekly check-in is a pause, a conscious moment to look at the landscape of your own mind. It's a way to step outside the noise and simply see where your energy, your focus, your attention truly went. Sometimes the answer was humbling. My attention lived in anxious thoughts about the future, or it lived in scrolling through other people's lives, or even it lived in replaying a mistake I made on Tuesday. I'd write it all down, not to judge myself, but with the curiosity of a scientist observing data. There was no good or bad, only what was. Other weeks, the map looked brighter. My attention lived in the feeling of the sun on my face. Or it found flow while I was organizing my bookshelf. Or it lived in a deep, uninterrupted conversation with a friend. You might also ask, how do I make these check-ins more effective? Start small and make it sacred. Choose a time that's quiet. Light a candle, take a breath, and be honest. Don't aim to fix everything. Just observe where you've been and set one gentle intention for where you'd like to go. Because the power of this ritual isn't in perfection, it's in the pattern it reveals. In time, I realized what I was truly doing. Each week, I was drawing the mandala of my own life. The check-in wasn't just reflection. It was observation, a mirror for consciousness. I could see when I was at the center, living with intention, and when I had drifted to the outer rings, into distraction, anxiety, and autopilot. Most importantly, I could see the paths I took back. It connected everything. The mandala wasn't just an image anymore. It was my week. The flow states weren't isolated moments. They were the bright spots on my map. The anchors weren't tools. They were home. The tiny habits weren't chores. They were the steady lines drawing my return. This is the heart of it all. The goal isn't a perfect, unbroken state of focus. That's a myth. The real goal is to build a life of conscious return, to get better at noticing where you are and remembering the way back home. The Mandala of Attention isn't a destination. It's a living practice, a compass you carry within, a gentle promise you make to yourself that no matter how far you drift, you're always worthy of the journey back. Your attention is the most sacred currency you own. It is the raw material of your entire life. So I'll leave you with the same question I ask myself every Sunday night. Look at the week ahead. Where will you choose to spend it? We began with a map. We searched for focus, for stillness, for a way to stop being carried away by the storm. And somewhere along the way, we discovered that the map was never out there. It was here, in the soft rhythm of attention returning home. Every anchor, every flow, every small pause was just a way of remembering what was always true. You were never lost. You just forgot where you were looking from.